The morning sunlight broke over a city that had learned to live in constant tension between progress and tradition, technology and justice. In the packed courtroom of Judge Elizabeth Mallory, the tension was palpable. Every seat was taken by people eager to witness a trial shrouded in controversy, high stakes, and richer-than-life twists of fate. The news had exploded across every media outlet. A beloved judge had banned cell phones in court in a bid to preserve the sanctity of justice, and yet, an unexpected loophole in the defendant's defense had turned the proceedings on its head. At the center of this whirlwind was Max Denning, a man known for his lavish lifestyle, but whose life was now defined by a strange new twist. Once famed as the sole beneficiary of a billion-dollar trust, Max had become ensnared in a controversy that threatened not just his fortune, but his freedom. His smart glasses, a pair of futuristic eyewear he had purchased with his considerable wealth, had recorded every moment of his interactions with the court on the day judges enacted the historic ban. As the courtroom fell quiet, whispers filled the hall. No longer was the old adage "silence in the sanctuary of justice" just a saying. Now technology was blurring the lines between tradition and modernity in ways that no one could have anticipated. In a nervous tone, Judge Mallory commenced the proceedings. "Today," she declared, "the integrity of our court is paramount. Therefore, I have banned cell phones and personal recording devices during these sessions." However, the defense team of Max Denning quickly interjected, arguing that dissent must be preserved, especially when technological innovations were meant to protect transparency. Some spectators murmured, recalling how news of the ban had generated even stronger interest in the trial. Lawyers in the courtroom leaned forward in anticipation as details of the case were revealed, details that would soon change the public's understanding of both technology and the law. As the trial unfolded, the prosecutor painted Max as a cunning businessman who had deliberately exploited a loophole in the system. His billions came from a trust that was as secretive as it was vast, his fortune accumulated over decades of shrewd investments and high-risk deals. The opposition contended that Max's smart glasses, which were not technically classified as a phone, had helplessly recorded critical statements, perhaps even his attempts to conceal evidence. However, even as these records were presented, contentious debates arose about the rights of the defendant and the sanctity of the court's orders. The judge cautioned, "The device in question might be modern, but it is nonetheless subject to the same restrictions imposed upon any form of electronic recording, unless specifically exempted by this court's authority." Meanwhile, behind the scenes, a parallel drama was unfolding, a tale that no one could have foreseen. In the gritty alleys of the city, beneath the neon glow of rundown street lamps, wandered a man whose story was nothing short of a modern legend. Vince Delgado, known by many on the streets as the homeless hero, had recently been embroiled in controversy of his own. Vince, long dismissed by the public as merely another casualty of life's harsh realities, had been falsely arrested, his only crime the misfortune of appearing suspicious near a scene of a minor disturbance. His story, however, took on a dramatic twist once a media storm revealed his past. Buried beneath layers of hardship and neglect was a war hero, a soldier who, decades ago, had fought valiantly in battle and had been decorated with not one, not two, but 3 Purple Hearts for his acts of bravery on the front lines. As the legal fates of both Max Denning and Vince Delgado became intertwined in the divided media landscape, crowds clung to every broadcast, every tweet, every blog post. For Max, the trial was not just about the billions at stake, it had become a symbol of how even the most sophisticated of technologies could challenge the established order. For Vince, the media outcry had become a personal reckoning. His wrongful arrest had ignited a firestorm of anger and outrage among supporters who demanded justice for a man who had given so much for his country. In another room brimming with anxious anticipation, attorneys strategized as the trial progressed. Max's legal team, led by the fiercely intelligent and resourceful Ms. Elena Rivera, argued that the smart glasses were merely a piece of technology, an accessory that had accidentally captured some events that were public knowledge anyway. "Your Honor," Rivera pleaded passionately, The evidence obtained through these devices was gathered prior to the ban and has no bearing on the court's current restrictions. Technology's evolution cannot be so easily stifled by archaic mandates, and in fact, it represents a step toward fuller transparency in our proceedings. Her words elicited a flurry of papers flipping in the courtroom as both sides grappled with the rapid changes provided by modern technology. In one dramatic turn, an unexpected witness was called, a technician who had been responsible for maintaining the software running on Max's glasses. The witness, with nerves that belied a quiet determination, explained how the device had a secure and tamper-proof logging system, one that could not be disabled by any local regulation or arbitrary ruling. When Your Honor banned cell phones, the legislation did not, and could not, anticipate that technology, in all its nuances, would create loopholes otherwise unimaginable, the technician argued. The courtroom erupted in low murmurs, the gravity of the technician's words sinking in. It was a poignant moment for many who had long believed in a strict divide between technology and the sanctity of the legal process. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, advocates rallied, protesting what they saw as an infringement on personal rights and the pursuit of transparency. This grassroots movement gained momentum as citizens began to see the issue not as a matter of mere legal technicality, but as a deep-seated question about privacy, innovation, and the evolving nature of justice. Parallel to these courtroom theatrics, the story of Vince Delgado grew more complex as journalists began digging into his past. Once dismissed as a broken man, Vince's history revealed countless acts of valor. A series of investigative reports chronicled his selfless actions during a devastating military conflict, where he had risked his life time and again to save his comrades. The media, initially enamored with the narrative of a homeless man unjustly arrested, soon unearthed documents and eyewitness testimonies confirming his identity as a decorated veteran. The revelation shook the community, forcing even his harshest critics to reconsider their perspectives. One particularly moving segment of the coverage was an interview with Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, a compatriot from Vince's military days. With an air of both admiration and regret, she recalled the harrowing moments on the battlefield. Vince was the kind of man who never hesitated to put himself in harm's way, she said, voice trembling with emotion. It wasn't just that he was brave. He had a profound sense of duty and loyalty to his country, his friends, and the ideals of honor and sacrifice. To see him reduced to this state, wandering the streets and being arrested without cause, is one of the greatest injustices of our time. Her words ignited a public outcry for justice, and soon social media was aflame with calls for Vince's immediate exoneration. As the trials in the courtroom and the streets moved inexorably forward, the city itself became a stage on which the battle for truth and modernity played out. Protests erupted near the courthouse, and community leaders gathered to demand systemic reforms that would reconcile the unexpected intermingling of high technology with age-old legal principles. Meanwhile, left-leaning bloggers and right-leaning pundits found common ground in their skepticism toward any authority that would operate without accountability, as both the banning of recording devices and the misidentification of a war hero eventually revealed deep flaws in the system. The intersection of these two narratives, Max Denning's courtroom drama and Vince Delgado's humanitarian struggle, provided fertile ground for unexpected alliances. Among them was Dr. Samuel Hayes, a seasoned legal scholar and technology ethicist, who took it upon himself to bridge the divide between what many saw as conflicting interests. Over a series of televised debates and panel discussions, Dr. Hayes argued passionately that the evolution of technology demanded an evolution of legal frameworks. When technology leaps forward, he remarked in an emotional address broadcast live, we must not cling to outdated laws as if they were relics of a bygone era. Instead, we must craft new systems that balance justice with innovation, privacy with transparency, and individual rights with societal responsibility. A turning point in the trial came unexpectedly, a moment when Max Denning's smart glasses, having recorded every detail, suddenly offered an illuminating glimpse into the truth. In an unforeseen twist, the device's memory card, previously thought to contain only innocuous recordings, revealed a series of cryptic messages exchanged between Max and one of his trusted confidants. These messages, at first glance, hinted at a possible arrangement to share confidential information with influential figures. The prosecution seized upon this new evidence, depicting Max not merely as a hapless victim of circumstantial chaos, but as a man who had manipulated technology to serve his own convoluted ends. However, Max's attorney, Ms. Elena Rivera, quickly countered the inference by arguing that the messages had been taken out of context. "We are witnessing an outrageous manipulation of facts," she declared before a captive audience. "These messages, though questionable to some, have no substantive link to any criminal conspiracy. They are, in fact, banal business communications between partners in a long journey of wealth accumulation. To equate these mundane texts with a deliberate circumvention of justice is an oversimplification that does a disservice to the complex realities of our modern financial world." The courtroom became a cauldron of conflicting interpretations, a place where every gesture, every word, challenged the very nature of truth. In one of the most dramatic scenes of the day, Judge Mallory pounded her gavel and bellowed, "Order in this court! Let it be known that while technology may record, it is the interpretation of humanity that gives meaning to events." Her words resonated across the room, forcing even the most hardline analysts to pause. It was a moment when the human factor, with all of its imperfections and emotions, was reasserted as the ultimate arbiter of justice. Yet as the trial was reaching its climax, a sudden development rattled the entire community. A long-forgotten file, mistakenly sealed for decades, surfaced in the public domain, and with it came confirmation of Vince Delgado's true identity, a decorated veteran whose feats in combat had been obscured by bureaucratic errors. This revelation, discovered by an intrepid journalist known only by the pseudonym Shadow, brought with it testimonies from former military colleagues, hospital records, and even personal letters from government officials of the day. For many, it was as if time itself had willed for Vince's narrative to emerge at this critical juncture, demanding not only justice but recognition of sacrifices made for the nation. As details emerged, the public reaction was electric. Crowds carried banners proclaiming "Justice for Vince" and "Honor the True Heroes." They marched in solidarity, demanding that the authorities set aside any remaining prejudice and apologize for the grievous mistake. Local community centers, once smothered in apathy, transformed into hubs of activism and support. Volunteers organized free legal aid clinics and counseling sessions, ensuring that Vince and others like him did not fade into obscurity once more. The once dismissed veteran now found himself at the crossroads of history, a symbol not only of personal redemption, but of a broader struggle against systemic injustice. Back in the courtroom, the weight of this external revelation permeated every word uttered. Even as the proceedings over Max Denning's case continued, the judge could not help but acknowledge the intertwining destinies of these two seemingly disparate figures. "We stand on the precipice of a new era," Judge Mallory intoned, "one where the lines between technology and humanity, between law and societal conscience, blur. It is our responsibility to navigate these treacherous waters with wisdom, compassion, and above all, an unwavering commitment to truth." Her words, resonant and measured, seemed to echo far beyond the confines of the courthouse, reaching into the hearts of all those present. The defense for Max, emboldened by the ensuing public debate on technology and justice, shifted their focus. They brought expert witnesses who extolled the virtues of modern technology, arguing that the smart glasses, as a matter of fact, had been a boon, a tool for truth rather than an instrument of subterfuge. One particular testimony from an IT security expert stood out. "In an era when everyone claims to be a victim of surveillance," the expert argued, "we must ensure that technology serves as a check against abuse." In Max's case, his device recorded events chronologically, ensuring that every gesture of the proceedings was verifiable. To disregard such evidence on a technicality would be tantamount to denying progress. Yet the prosecution was far from mollified. They countered by pointing out that technological loopholes were, in themselves, a hazard that could undermine the dignity of the judicial process. We must remember, argued the lead prosecutor, that the purpose of the ban on personal devices was to shield the courtroom from external influences, protecting both the process and the privacy of those involved. To allow any device that has the potential to record without restriction is to invite chaos. His categorical stance was underpinned by the fear that, in a society saturated with technology, individual rights might someday overshadow communal responsibilities. Amidst the heated debate over technology's role in courtrooms, the case's undercurrents began to examine deeper societal questions of trust, memory, and the nature of justice. Max Denning's lofty stature, both as a financial mogul and as an inadvertent pioneer of modern legal intricacies, contrasted sharply with the humble heroism of Vince Delgado. Their narratives, a study in extremes, invited the public to reflect on the profound disparities within society. In a particularly riveting moment, as the tension mounted, Elena Rivera was granted the floor to deliver a closing argument that felt more like a soliloquy than a legal statement. "We live in a time of great paradoxes," she began, her voice imbued with both conviction and melancholy. "Here we have technology which can capture every nuance of our humanity. Yet it is our very interpretation that transforms these raw facts into the narrative of our lives." Max's smart glasses did not record some diabolical scheme. They simply captured human actions, open to misinterpretation by those with narrow perspectives. And then there is Vince, a man who has forfeited his identity in the labyrinth of public opinion, only to be rediscovered as a hero. Her words were met with a stunned silence, and then a slow unfolding of understanding among many present. The next few days saw an unprecedented level of public engagement. Legal scholars, technologists, military historians, and ordinary citizens joined hands in debating and dissecting every facet of the case. Town halls were filled to capacity, and news channels replayed segments of the trial repeatedly, inviting analysis from every conceivable angle. It felt as though a national conversation had been sparked, one that transcended the immediate facts of the case and ventured into the broader realm of how society must adapt to rapid technological changes while honoring its timeless values. The echoes of this dialogue resonated well into the night, when heated discussions in coffee shops and living rooms alike questioned whether justice was being served or manipulated by evolving technology and human error. As the trial approached its climax, an unexpected twist brought further gravity to the proceedings. In a dramatic courtroom revelation, a confidential informant, previously believed to be a minor peripheral character, stepped forward with evidence that directly implicated a high-ranking corporate figure in a broader conspiracy designed not only to safeguard financial interests but also to manipulate legislative guidelines regarding recording devices. With documents and electronic logs in hand, the informant detailed how certain corporate entities had steered lawmakers toward creating a legal framework that conveniently overlooked technological advancements when it suited their interests, yet harshly regulated citizens. "It is a tale of hypocrisy," the informant proclaimed, voice trembling with equal parts fear and resolve, "where the rules change based on who holds the power." The revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Suddenly, Max Denning's case, initially perceived as a clash between man and machine, now took on an altogether different hue. It was the story of a wealthy man who found his life ensnared in a web spun by powerful interests, where his every move was monitored and interpreted in ways designed to obscure a larger, more insidious conspiracy. The defense seized on this angle, arguing that Max's smart glasses were nothing more than a victim of circumstance, a collateral tool in an elaborate plan to hinder transparency and maintain the status quo of power dynamics in society. At the same time, the story of Vince Delgado, the homeless veteran, continued to evolve in parallel. Journalists who had once been content with surface-level narratives dug deeper, interviewing old associates and family members who confirmed the incredible sacrifices he had made in times of war. In heartfelt interviews, relatives recounted nights when Vince had mended the wounds of dying comrades under enemy fire, and the countless times when his courage shone as he risked everything for the sake of honor. This slowly transformed the public's impression of the man from a faceless casualty of bureaucratic oversight to a symbol of resilience and selfless service. As support for Vince built momentum, local councils and veteran advocacy groups publicly demanded not only a full exoneration of his name, but also a revision of the processes that had led to his wrongful arrest. In an emotionally charged moment during a subsequent hearing, Vince himself was called to testify. With a mix of humility and quiet dignity, he recounted a story of battle, of bonds forged in the crucible of conflict, and of the price he had paid for his country's freedom, a price that, until now, had remained largely unacknowledged. "I never sought fame," Vince murmured, eyes fixed on a distant memory. "All I ever wanted was to do my duty, to protect those I loved. To be reduced to a headline is an injustice, for it denies the truth of one's sacrifices." His testimony, punctuated by pauses heavy with unshed tears and the silent reverence of those who had gathered, validated not only his own identity but also the narratives of countless others who had been similarly overlooked. The public discourse, now riding a tidal wave of emotion, pressed for reforms that would prevent such miscarriages of justice in the future. Lawmakers were met with petitions, phone calls, and impassioned letters urging them to consider amendments that reconciled the rapid pace of technological advancement with the need for judicial clarity. A fevered campaign began, its slogans echoing in protests and online forums alike, demanding that no one, regardless of wealth, should be allowed to exploit loopholes for personal gain, and that the system must be reformed to protect the vulnerable from being silenced by technology or oversight. Over the course of the trial, as evidence was meticulously examined, witnesses revisited their statements, and debates raged, a subtle shift seemed to take place. The cumbersome machinery of legal formalities began to yield to an emerging ethos. Justice, it was increasingly argued, was not to be measured solely by technicalities and loopholes, but by the fundamental fairness that had been the cornerstone of every democratic society. Judge Mallory, in her closing remarks, emphasized that while rulings must always adhere to the letter of the law, they should never stray from its spirit. "We stand here not in a vacuum of regulations," she proclaimed, but in the vibrant, messy, unpredictable realm of human experience where truth is multifaceted and ever-evolving. Let us not be ensnared by outdated paradigms when the horizon of progress beckons. In the days that followed, as the final deliberations commenced behind closed doors, the storylines of Max Denning and Vince Delgado continued to resonate across the nation. Max's smart glasses, once regarded as a mere accessory of wealth, had instead become a symbol of the paradox of modern times, a reminder that every technological marvel carried within it the potential for both enlightenment and exploitation. His fate, ultimately, was left suspended between the rigid interpretations of the law and the ever-shifting public sentiment that demanded accountability from those who had long operated behind layers of corporate and political secrecy. Simultaneously, Vince Delgado's reemergence as a war hero and a victim of systemic failures cemented his place in history. With every sunrise, the streets echoed with chants of his name and the collective hope for better treatment of those who had sacrificed more than words could capture. His daily struggles on the streets, once a poignant sign of society's neglect, were now recontextualized as testaments to endurance, valor, and the need for compassion in a world gripped by technological frenzy and bureaucratic inertia. As the trial's verdict loomed, legal analysts speculated about the implications of the case for future jurisprudence. Publications dissected every court transcript, every behavioral cue, and every piece of evidence with an intensity that mirrored the public's own quest for truth. The notion that technology could subvert court orders was both unsettling and undeniable. Lawmakers began convening special committees, and think tanks produced white papers exploring how to reconcile digital innovation with centuries-old judicial traditions. This was not merely a local issue, but a beacon for global discussions on digital rights, accountability, and the preservation of democratic principles in an age where information and misinformation moved at light speed. In the final courtroom sessions, a palpable mixture of anticipation and solemnity filled the air. The jury, composed of citizens from diverse backgrounds, had been sequestered for days as they pieced together the intricacies of the case. Legal experts debated the weight of the evidence while the public watched with bated breath, their eyes glued to screens as every nuance was dissected in minute detail. At one point, a veteran reporter noted that the case had come to symbolize not only the modern struggle for transparency, but also the enduring need for empathy and human oversight amid overwhelming progress. Then, in a moment that would be etched in the annals of history, the jury returned with its verdict. The gavel struck with a sound that reverberated like a heartbeat through the vast chamber. The foreman began to speak, his voice measured and cautious, aware that his words would shape not only the fate of Max Denning, but also the future trajectory of legal discourse regarding technology. "We, the jury," he intoned, "find that while the evidence gathered via the smart glasses may raise questions about procedural technicalities, it is insufficient to substantiate an overriding claim of deliberate criminal misconduct on the part of the defendant." A ripple of mixed emotions surged through the courtroom. Some sighed in relief, while others frowned at what they saw as a narrow interpretation of justice. Max Denning's defense team exhaled in unison, relief mingled with the heavy weight of a verdict that promised to be appealed on multiple grounds. Ms. Elena Rivera stepped forward, her eyes shimmering with both satisfaction and the burden of a responsibility that transcended an individual case. "This verdict is neither a final resolution nor a blank check for impunity," she declared, her voice rising so that every corner of the room caught her fervor. "It is a call to arms, for legal reform, for a re-evaluation of how our society integrates technology into its most sacred institutions, and for justice that is willing to evolve with the times." Outside the courthouse, the divergent narratives of Max and Vince converged in unexpected ways. News anchors balanced their reports between analyzing the legal ramifications for wealthy elites and highlighting the redemptive journey of a homeless veteran whose bravery had long been neglected by an indifferent system. Community leaders organized vigils and celebratory events, symbolic gestures that bridged the gap between two stories representing the extreme contrasts of modern society. In the short period between dawn and dusk, protests gave way to peaceful gatherings, and once bitter debates melded into a communal resolve to correct the errors of the past. Over subsequent weeks, legislators debated new measures aimed at clarifying technology's role within the courtroom. Recognizing the inherent challenges of crafting laws that would not inadvertently suppress transparency or protect those in white-collar positions from accountability, a series of compromises seemed inevitable, a blend of old legal traditions and new digital realities. The case, it was whispered, had become a catalyst. Every jurist, every advocate, every person listening to the late-night news recognized its importance. The digital footprint of justice, it seemed, had taken its first tentative steps towards self-reflection. Amidst this legal renaissance, Vince Delgado, now publicly exonerated, began a new chapter in his life. Government agencies promised to ensure he received proper medical care, housing, and the acknowledgement he deserved for his military service. His story, while painful, sparked an era of renewed respect for veterans and people who had been marginalized. News outlets that once dismissed him as a transient now highlighted the heroism of his past and the promise of his future. In quiet moments, Vince could be seen sitting on a park bench, a humble figure whose eyes held decades of struggle, sacrifice, and hope. Somewhere in his worn leather jacket, amidst the scars of battle and hardship, lay the unbroken spirit of a warrior destined to be recognized by history. As the nation processed the verdict and its implications, academic institutions organized seminars and conferences to explore the ethical dimensions of technology within legal contexts. Graduate students and seasoned scholars alike examined how smart devices, once symbols of modern prosperity, had transformed into harbingers of both transparency and new forms of legal complexity. Professors argued that Max Denning's case had highlighted the need to create digital logs that were not only immutable, but also interpreted with the highest standards of fairness. Some argued that in the near future, every piece of evidence would require a fusion of human judgment with artificial intelligence, a design that could perhaps mitigate the pitfalls of human error or technological exploitation. Yet, as discussions spun into policy debates and academic treatises, the human stories at the heart of the matter continued to pulse strongly. In a quiet suburb far from the maelstrom of media and legal limelight, a local community center organized a memorial event dedicated to the forgotten heroes of the past, including Vince Delgado. The event drew a small, solemn crowd, where tearful speeches and measured applause celebrated the dignity of those who had served their country without expectation of reward. It was a heartfelt reminder that behind every headline and legal battle, there existed real people with real struggles, a humanity that technology, for all its marvels, could never fully capture. As the curtains slowly closed on the trial, Max Denning's case continued its turbulent journey through appeals and legal reviews. The complexities of technology in the courtroom were too profound to be neatly wrapped up in a single verdict. And while Max's futuristic eyewear had become a symbol of the contradictions of progress, it also underscored the collective challenge of reconciling the digital with the human. In hushed conversations in legal circles and spirited debates in coffee shops, voices echoed a shared sentiment, a determination to evolve our legal frameworks so that they recognized both the possibilities and limitations of our modern age. Months turned into seasons, and as nature paralleled the cycles of renewal and decay, the stories of Max and Vince found their places in the tapestry of societal memory. For some, Max Denning became a cautionary tale of wealth, technology, and the cost of a rapidly evolving legal landscape. Reminders that no amount of money could fully shield one from the transformative force of justice. For others, Vince Delgado emerged as an emblem of hope, a testament to the enduring resilience of men and women who, despite being forgotten by a system gone awry, found redemption through the power of truth and collective will. In time, Judge Mallory's historic courtroom order banning personal devices was revisited by lawmakers who recognized that the arrow of progress could not be restrained by outdated decrees. New regulations emerged, ones that balanced the right to a private, dignified trial with the undeniable benefits that technology provided in ensuring transparency and accountability. The legacy of the case, with its twists of smart glasses and war heroes, served as a constant reminder that justice, like technology, was ever-changing, ever-evolving, and that its true power lay in its ability to adapt to the needs of the people it served. Late one autumn evening, as the city settled into the gentle rhythm of dusk, an elderly man named Arthur, a retired judge who had once presided over many significant cases, sat in his study and reflected on the events that had so fervently transformed the legal landscape. With a voice filled with both nostalgia and cautious optimism, Arthur noted, "We are living in extraordinary times, a time when technology records every moment, yet it is the human heart that decides what is just and fair. We must remember that while advancements may change how we document life, it is the incorruptible spirit of humanity that must always guide us." His words, softly spoken yet profound, encapsulated the essence of an era defined by paradox and progress alike. The world, it seemed, was forging ahead, a world where billions were questioned, where the legacies of heroes were finally acknowledged after years of neglect, and where justice was no longer a static ideal, but a dynamic force shaped by the interplay of old-world wisdom and the relentless march of innovation. The trial had not closed the chapter on discussions of privacy, technology, and human dignity. Instead, it had opened an expansive book filled with blank pages waiting for the next generation to inscribe its lessons. And so it was that in the grand narrative of life, where every individual played a small yet enduring role, the story of a ban on phones in a courtroom and the unexpected capture of truth on smart glasses became emblematic of a society in flux. Max Denning's luxury now mingled with the echoes of Vince Delgado's sacrifice, a harmony that, while discordant at times, heralded a future where the technology we create must be tempered by the timeless values of justice, empathy, and accountability. In the end, the stirring events of that fateful trial and the ensuing revelations were not merely episodes of legal drama or media theatrics. They were the living embodiment of the collision between eras, a blend of cold, unerring technology and the warm, pulsating emotions of a society that refused to abandon its hope for fairness. As new laws were drafted, old wounds gradually healed, and society learned to embrace innovation within the framework of equitable justice. One truth remained undeniable. In a world awash with digital evidence and mechanical precision, it is ultimately the human heart that writes the true story of our times. Looking back from the vantage point of future years, scholars would recount the saga as a pivotal juncture, a moment when society was forced to acknowledge that no matter how advanced our devices or comprehensive our legal codes became, the essence of justice was rooted in our shared capacity for compassion. Families who had once felt powerless watched as lawmakers, influenced by the twin tales of a billionaire in the crosshairs of modern scrutiny, and a homeless veteran vindicated at last, brought about reforms that would forever alter the tapestry of our collective law. Each new regulation was inspired not solely by the need to check technological overreach, but by the enduring belief that every life, be it cloaked in wealth or marred by misfortune, deserved an honest chance at redemption. As the years passed, the memory of the trial lingered like a well-worn book on a community bookshelf, a story that had been passed on from one generation to the next. In that tale were embedded lessons about the risks of unchecked progress, the potential of technology to both unravel and reinforce truth, and the inviolable human capacity to rise above the confines imposed by circumstance. In classrooms, activists recounted the trial as a watershed moment that paved the way for a more transparent, humane system of justice, one where every voice, be it shouted from the corridors of power or whispered from a quiet street corner, was valued and heard. And so, in a city where the old and the new coexisted in a perpetual dance of challenges and triumphs, the legacy of that historic day, a day when a judge banned phones in court only to have defendants' smart glasses capture the unforeseen, became a rallying call. A call not just to lawyers or lawmakers, but to every citizen who believed that, in our intricate wired world, the essence of truth was a product of both innovation and the indomitable human spirit. In that inexorable process of evolution, where each scandal and redemption, every misstep and moment of clarity molded the moral fabric of society, the narratives of Max Denning and Vince Delgado found their rightful places. They were neither wholly victims nor absolute villains, but symbols of a transitional era, a time when established systems were forced to reckon with the relentless tide of progress and, in doing so, rediscover what it truly meant to be just. As twilight turned to night, one crisp, starlit evening, the city exhaled a collective sigh, half relief, half anticipation of another day's battles and breakthroughs. In the quiet of his modest bedroom, a young lawyer named Cassandra, inspired by the trial and the legacy of those who had come before her, penned a humble note in her journal. We are all, in some way, custodians of history. What we do when confronted with the dual forces of technology and human fallibility will determine whether justice remains a sacred trust or becomes yet another casualty of progress. Her simple words carried the weight of the ages and served as a reminder that even as the battle for fairness waged on in courtrooms and on the streets, the hope for a world that balanced modern complexity with timeless values burned brighter than ever. Thus, the intertwined fates of an affluent defendant and a forgotten war hero illuminated more than just the corridors of law or the headlines of fleeting news. They revealed the myriad ways in which our society at large struggles, adapts, and ultimately evolves. Their stories, enmeshed with digital records and human memories, became testimonies to the belief that though the mechanisms of control might change, the pursuit of truth remains an unyielding, perennial human endeavor. And as each new day dawned over a reformed world, a world that had learned, if only in fits and starts, to navigate the tensions of the past with the promise of technology, the legacy of that turbulent time continued to inspire, reminding all that even in the great expanse of relentless progress, the heart's quest for justice would forever be its guiding light. In the final reckoning, as the echoes of that rigorous trial faded into history and new challenges took center stage, society found itself irrevocably altered by the events of those fateful days. The smart glasses, once an instrument of controversy, became emblematic of an age where our tools not only recorded our actions, but, if calibrated with careful ethics and human insight, could help verify the truth behind any claim. And while Max Denning's trial would forever be debated in legal textbooks, Vince Delgado's journey, marked by despair, resilience, and eventual vindication, remained a stark reminder that the forgotten voices of the past are the ones that often hold the keys to a more empathetic future. As the years melded together, each memory, each legal precedent, and every heartfelt accolade for the brave veteran stood testament to a revolutionary shift. A shift that had begun in a courtroom fraught with tension and ended in a society determined to harmonize New Age technology with the enduring principles of fairness. And in every quiet moment, be it a reflective pause in a bustling city or the solitary gaze of an elderly citizen looking back at a life fully lived, there remained the abiding truth that no system, however advanced, could ever eclipse the fundamental human values of honor, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Ultimately, in that timeless interplay of human frailty and technological might, the saga of banned phones, defiant smart glasses, and a homeless veteran's vindication emerged not simply as a legal conundrum, but as a stirring call for deeper introspection. It urged every individual to remain vigilant in a rapidly changing world, to question authority when needed, and above all, to cherish the human capacity for growth, renewal, and the chance to rewrite our own destinies. For in every legal battle, every protest on the city's streets, and every whispered hope that echoed in a humble interview, there lay the seeds of a future that was as promising as it was uncertain. A future in which technology, when guided by a collective conscience, could indeed serve as an instrument of justice rather than oppression. And thus, as city lights twinkled against the backdrop of a star-studded sky, this remarkable chapter in our shared history closed on a note of cautious optimism. The story of Max Denning and Vince Delgado had become a legend, a sprawling epic of modern times that bridged the gap between digital innovation and timeless human dignity. It was a story of trials, tribulations, revelations, and ultimately redemption. A story that would live on in every reform enacted, every policy debated, and every heart that dared to dream of a world where truth, in all its complicated glory, reigned supreme. In that enduring narrative, the ban on phones, the relentless recording of evidence by defiant smart glasses, and the unlikely redemption of a homeless veteran converged into a singular testament to the power of resilience and the timeless nature of justice. And if one were to ask what the ultimate lesson of this saga was, it might well be summarized in the simple yet profound acknowledgement that in our inexorable race toward progress, the true measure of our humanity lies in our unwavering commitment to ensuring that every voice is not only heard, but valued amidst the clamor of the digital age. The legacy of those tumultuous days continues to inspire reform, reflection, and a shared vision for a more compassionate legal system, a system that balances rapid innovation with the responsibility of safeguarding the rights and dignities of every individual. And long after the gavel had fallen and the cameras had ceased rolling, the lessons learned in that courtroom lived on, echoing through every subsequent trial, every policy session, and every community gathering where the whispers of justice mingled with the determined hope for a fairer, brighter tomorrow. This story, rich in contrast and layered in meaning, remains a testament to the enduring struggle between man and machine, between progress and justice, and ultimately between the ephemeral nature of our digital footprints and the timeless spirit of human compassion. May it serve as a constant reminder that even in a world dominated by technology, it is the cherished ideals of dignity, honor, and truth that will forever